Well, hundreds of migrants have drowned in recent weeks on a perilous route across the Mediterranean Sea in boats like these ones. Asylum seekers leave North Africa hoping to reach Europe. Many do not make it. The lucky ones often picked up by coast guards and rescue teams. I want to start this part of the show with Fred Pleitgen, who went on a patrol ride with the EU border agency known as Frontex and the Italian Navy. This is a report that he filed.
Takeoff from Sicily. We're on a Portuguese military plane flying for Frontex, the EU's border patrol mission. Past the Mount Etna volcano and out to sea, hunting for human trafficking boats.
In the missions, every week we found 3-4 targets of interest.
We're not allowed to identify any of the crew members. People smuggling is big business, and they might become targets for criminal gangs. The plane uses modern radars and cameras to track suspicious ships and quickly find several. People are mostly smuggled in old, often unseaworthy fishing boats. The crew finds this empty rubber boat they believe might have been abandoned by migrants after they reached Europe's shores.
The main goal is to detect targets that of interest that Frontex gave us the coordinates about. We go there and we see, and then we transmit everything to the Frontex.
This plane is equipped for border patrol activity, but it can also come to the rescue if there's a disaster involving a boat with migrants on board. It can coordinate rescue activities and can even deploy life rafts for those who fall in the water. And those search and rescue capabilities have been needed often in recent times as waves of migrant boats, mostly from northern Africa, try to make their way towards Europe and often get into trouble at sea. Many survivors are brought here to the Pozzallo camp. Henry Linus is from Nigeria and says the ship he was on almost sank in a storm.
No food, we excrete inside the boat. People were vomiting. People were vomiting everywhere. It was soup. It was horrible.
Most of the people we spoke to said if they could start over, they wouldn't attempt the treacherous boat journey again. Frontex's mission is to prevent illegal entry into the EU, but in many cases it's become a mission to save lives, often involving not just planes, but Navy and Coast Guard ships as well. The Italian Coast Guard always has several of these rescue boats on standby. They can go extremely fast and can take on as many as 130 people in distress. Italian Coast Guard officials say in previous years, the stream of migrants often stopped in the fall and winter months. But given the milder weather this year, there has been no let-up. The most dangerous thing is when you see a boat that is made of really old wood, he says. God knows how it is held together, and it can fall apart just by our ships coming close. Andrea Tassara is the Coast Guard commander in Pozzallo, Sicily, one of the busiest in Europe. He says overcrowded boats often make the rescue efforts even more dangerous. The biggest danger is that an unstable boat capsizes, he says, and the migrants can't swim, and we need to proceed with the rescue in the water as well. That's apparently what happened on October 3rd of this year, when people aboard an overloaded migrant boat moved around trying to call for help. It capsized and more than 300 drowned, most of them Eritreans. Back in the camp, this man was supposed to be on board that vessel. He took a different ship because the boat was overcrowded. Many people he knew perished in the incident.
Some of them are our parents or wives or children in there. We were part of them, but unfortunately we were, the boat was full and we were obliged to stay for a moment.
As we complete our Frontex flight, we pass the island Lampedusa, the destination many migrants coming from North Africa try to reach. A dangerous and sometimes deadly endeavor which the EU can try to contain, but will probably never be able to stop. Fred Pleitgen, CNN, Catania, Sicily.
I want to take a look at some of the main routes used by migrants then trying to reach Europe. According to the border agency Frontex, the most heavily trafficked is the eastern Mediterranean route. More than 37,000 are said to have entered illegally this way in 2012, many of them Afghan, Syrian and Bangladeshi. The so-called central Mediterranean route saw more than 10,000 migrants enter the EU via Italy. This is the same route where hundreds recently died when their ship sank near that Italian island of Lampedusa. And the western Mediterranean route saw more than 6,000 illegal entries into Europe, with migrants crossing into the Iberian Peninsula. Well, EU leaders are meeting in Brussels to try to tackle the migrant issue. They are pledging to take action, but there is a growing rift between countries in the north and those in the south. I spoke to the spokesman for the EU Commissioner for Home Affairs and asked if Europe's south is bearing the brunt for the rest of the continent.
Of course, the pressure is on some Mediterranean countries. But let's not forget that if we talk about asylum seekers and refugees, then the countries in the EU that are receiving most of the refugees are Germany, France, Belgium, UK and Sweden. So 5 countries take 70% of the asylum requests in the EU. This doesn't mean that the Mediterranean countries do not face extreme pressure, and this is why we want to support them, and we want member states to show concrete solidarity with them.
All right. Well, Malta's Prime Minister, for example, has said that migration poses a question of the very survival for his country. So what more at this stage can Europe do?
Well, we have to act in the medium and long term, but we also have to be active in the short term. In the short term, the aim is to save lives at sea. We have to prevent tragedies like the one in Lampedusa, and to do so we want to increase the presence of Frontex, our agency for coordination of border surveillance, and we need member states to make available resources, technical, human and financial resources, in order to have more people and more surveillance at sea. We will also have soon a new system, Eurosur, operational, beginning of December. This will allow to detect small boats and dinghies, which are often used by the criminals behind these tragedies.
All right, OK, the Frontex border agency, hang on, the Frontex border agency that you've just alluded to has seen its funding shrink, I think I'm right in saying, from something like 118 million euros in 2011 to less than 100 now. If you want to see more action taken by Frontex, surely it needs more cash.
This is exactly what we have put on the table of the Ministers for Interior of the European Union. The European Commission has been constantly saying that we need more resources for Frontex if we want the agency to be more operational, and this is a matter of fact. So if we want to increase surveillance and if we want to save lives in the Mediterranean, we need Frontex to have the necessary resources.
This in the long term is oftentimes a story of human trafficking, which is something that we must all help to stamp out. I just want to come back to these southern European states, finally. I've heard a number of officials from a number of countries saying that we should intervene to prevent these boats arriving on shore. Send them back, is what they say. What do you say to those leaders of southern European countries?
Well, this is against not only the international obligations, the EU legislation, but it's also against the values on which the European Union is based. These people often need asylum or international protection, and we have the obligation to do so. And this means that refoulement or pushbacks are not allowed, and of course we will not allow any member state to act in such a way.
Right, live from London, you're watching Connect the World. After the break, we meet a